Achieved quorum for the Racial Justice Commission. I am calling to order the Racial Justice Commission meeting, public meeting for December 9th, 2021. We have a very full agenda. Our aim for a number of reasons is to be done by 6 p.m. And so we're going to keep to a tight schedule. We will begin the meeting first by just welcoming everyone into this space. I am delighted that we have here with us in person several commissioners. And from my far left, at my far left is Commission Member Joanne Yu, then Commission Member and Deputy Mayor Phil Thompson. And to my right, we have Commissioner Chris Coy and Commissioner Ann Bermudez-Dean. And I am the Commissioner and Chair Jennifer Jones-Austin. Joining us virtually, we have Commission members Larry Daniel Favors, and as well as Commission Member Derek Hamilton. We anticipate that we will be joined by Commission members Fred Davey and Yesenia Mata, as well as Commission Member Kay Bain and our Vice Chair Henry Garrido, whose 50th birthday it is today. And so maybe he's somewhere having cake. You know, he'll be with us shortly, and we'll maybe sing happy birthday to him. Maybe you all will surprise him. So I'm excited to welcome people from the community. And I understand that we may also have members of the media who are with us today. It is a very significant and important meeting in the life and the work of the Racial Justice Commission. It is significant and important because we have arrived at that point in our process where we are taking the step, the very critical step of formally solidifying our ballot proposals and voting on a resolution to direct the commission staff to produce the final report. Before we jump into the substance of the meeting, I want to have us take a look at the December 3rd, 2021 meeting minutes, and everyone should have received them already. I'm going to give you a second to take a look at them. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 3rd, 2021?
So moved.
May I have that motion seconded? Any discussion, any questions, comments, changes? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes for the December 3rd, 2021 meeting have been approved in absolute. So today, as I said, we're going to be taking the critical step forward of solidifying the ballot proposals and voting on a resolution to direct the staff to produce the final report, which will contain the ballot proposals in the form of ballot measures, as well as a racial justice roadmap that looks to the work that extends beyond what the commission has done and makes recommendations for going forward and to the, taking further steps in pursuit of racial equity. Today, we are going to go through the recommendations, the proposed ballot measures, but before we do that, we're going to have a discussion about the racial justice roadmap recommendations. I believe it's critical that before we jump into the proposals that we have been spending a lot of time on, we first have some conversation and discussion about this racial justice roadmap, which will accompany the ballot measures in the final report. What I want everybody to appreciate is that we knew at the beginning of the commission's journey that we would not be able to tackle everything and that we needed to center on a finite set of ballot measures. The proposals for charter revision put forward that we're putting forward today set a foundation for racial equity, and that would propel the city across the city of New York, the institutions of government forward in advancing power, access, and opportunity for everyone. What I want people to appreciate is that our aim was to set the foundation for going forward, identifying the harms that have been exacted upon BIPOC persons and communities, and then creating a path forward to address those harms and work to prevent them on a going forward basis. The commission appreciated that there were several recommendations brought forward by the public, by the community, by various thought leaders, as well as by commissioners themselves, that when we looked at them, did not fall within the authority of the Charter Revision Commission itself. Some of them fall outside of the charter, the New York City Charter. Some were legislative in nature, and some would require action at the state and the federal levels. All undertakings that fall beyond the authority, extend beyond the authority of the charter. We also appreciated that there were issues and specific policy recommendations that, how do I best say this, that were not necessarily in keeping with this thinking about, okay, how do we, on a prospective basis, try to undo the harms and advance true change, sustainable change in a foundational manner. And so what we want to do at this time is present some of these overarching, or present these, I should say, these overarching issues and specific policy changes that the commission, along with the commission staff, gave consideration to. And then ultimately a determination was made when we went through the criteria that commission members were made aware of for how we approach this work, where we made a determination that they would not be presented in ballot changes, but rather would be incorporated into a racial justice roadmap that would indicate to the public at large, to administrations to follow this administration, to other branches of government and other levels of government at the state and federal level, the additional work that needs to be done, that must be done to bring about racial equity. A few words about the overarching frameworks that we determined not to engage and address at this particular point. And then our executive director, Anusha Venkatraman, and possibly our policy director, Jimmy Pan, will go into some more of the specific recommendations that do not appear as ballot measures. There were two overarching frameworks that we gave some consideration to. One being reconciliation, and the second being reparations. Racial reconciliation and healing, also often talked about as truth and reconciliation, involves the public naming and acknowledgement of past harms and traumas, recognition of responsibility in causing or creating the conditions that caused those harms, and taking actions to repair relationships and social bonds. Reconciliation can also involve public apologies and reparative actions that bring justice to those harmed. At the outset of our work together, the commission recognized the importance of moving our city towards reconciliation. Some will remember that in our public meetings, we acknowledged the extensive harms that have been visited upon BIPOC communities and upon the land on which we stand and sit, and the persons who occupied those lands in the earliest days of this society. And we did that. But we also took some time to examine the way in which reconciliation processes have worked in other cities and countries, consulted with experts who've engaged in reconciliation processes. We had conversations with persons who were involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa that was led by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And what we heard repeatedly and consistently was that their universal experience was that a meaningful reconciliation process is a lengthy one in which considerable time must be invested to create a foundation of trust upon which to build so that it can move forward with the sensitivity, seriousness, and respect that it deserves. Understanding the time constraints under which we have been operating, the commission did not want to shortchange that important process by proceeding without the necessary deliberation and foundation of trust. And so with that appreciation, we determined that we were not going to engage in a full-blown reconciliation effort. What the commission does recommend, and this would appear in the final report, is that city government continue to engage in the work of exploring reconciliation through deep engagement with communities, continuing to clearly acknowledge the harms, both past and present, and by employing a reparative frame in decision-making processes whenever possible. Closely tied to reconciliation, reparations brings justice to those impacted by severe injustice, often through monetary or material compensation. While some municipalities in other states have begun modest and targeted programs centered on reparations, the scale of the injustices suffered, we believe, must be great in scope and must be looked at also through the eyes of what is happening nationally. Through HR 40 at the national level, which has been named symbolically for the unmet promise that people who were formerly enslaved would receive 40 acres and a mule. It's a bill with nearly 200 co-sponsors that was advanced earlier this year by the House Judiciary Committee and its companion Senate bill. There has been an attempt to at least begin at the national level a conversation about reparations. The commission is hopeful that these conversations will move beyond the current exploratory phase and into concrete action. No doubt, this is a large and costly endeavor, as it should be. But again, one the commission largely believes is worth meaningful exploration by lawmakers and policymakers. Given the scope of the issue and the limited time we had to pursue structural change, we made a determination, again, looking at the criteria, that we would use our current opportunity to center on dismantling systemic racism with a focus on perspective change that would rebuild structures for the benefit of future generations. But we do feel that it's important to discuss the inclusion in our of reparations in our final report with a recommendation to that effect. And so what we are seeking to do is advance in the final report a recommendation as follows. Advocate to the federal government to formally study and make recommendations for a national reparations program. Use such a frame in making decisions around resources at the city level. I now will pass this part of the meeting to the staff to share an overview of what is to be included in the roadmap to appear in the final report. And then we will have an opportunity for commission members to share their thoughts and provide feedback. I want to say, as we move into this portion of the meeting, appreciating that we are under time constraints and that we have a critical vote to be undertaken with respect to the resolution, we are going to limit discussion, and this is pursuant to the Roberts Rules and to the authority under the commission. We are going to limit the discussion on the racial justice roadmap to 4:55 p.m. 25 minutes for this discussion. And so now for the presentation and the discussion, I will turn to our Executive Director, Anusha Venkatraman, and to our Policy Director, Jimmy Pan, to present specific recommendations for inclusion in the Racial Justice Roadmap to appear in the final report.
Thank you so much, Chair. This is working, correct? Yes. So thank you for providing the overarching framework. I think the frameworks of both reconciliation and reparations can be viewed as overarching the other recommendations, which are much more specific in nature as well, and which will sound very familiar to many of you, certainly to our commissioners, as well as to members of the public who've been following along with our process. The team, the staff has already been working on drafting up the roadmap with these recommendations, but we wanted to make sure that we're discussing them with you as the commission to make sure that we have the opportunity to revise them, to add to them, and get some consensus around what we're moving forward with as the stated recommendations from the commission that go beyond the ones that we're putting forward as revisions to the New York City Charter. So I'll name the high level proposals for those recommendations. And then I'll go into some greater detail, and Jimmy and also Sam Stanton will help us as well. So one, strengthen existing government oversight bodies. 2, enhance accountability for racial equity. 3, develop and implement tools to measure racial equity. 4, advance community safety and reform the criminal legal system. 5, expand voting and community power. And 6, use land justice as a frame for land use and planning. So going into further details on those overarching recommendations, or those higher level recommendations. 1, strengthen existing government oversight bodies. We did have an extensive conversation on this point at our last meeting. It should sound quite familiar. The recommendation here is to strengthen the following existing city oversight structures, which all play a critical role in ensuring racial justice and equity for New Yorkers, especially in their interactions with New York City government and at times with private companies. So 1 is to give the Board of Correction the ability to bring administrative action against the Department of Correction. 2, to put some recommendations forth to strengthen CCRB, particularly in recommending that MOUs around pattern and practice investigations continue, to seek final authority for CCRB in all cases. There are also some state level amendments that we weren't able to consider at the city level, giving the oversight body of CCRB final authority in police discipline. Under strengthening existing oversight structures, we also saw a potential to strengthen the City Commission on Human Rights, including ensuring that they have a minimum secure budget, giving the Equal Employment Practices Commission more explicit jurisdiction over city bodies beyond the mayoral agencies, including City Council, Public Advocate, Comptroller, Borough Presidents. Allow them to fill vacancies, and create a general rule that allows charter entities who oversee a single agency, such as the Board of Corrections, such as CCRB, to be able to request data and information from the agencies that they oversee and to have that published. So this contains some very specific recommendations, all from something that we had previously considered as a charter proposal. The rationale for moving it to the recommendation for further exploration is that this needs further work. There are many specific ideas contained within this recommendation, which do need some greater consideration. We decided not to take it up as a commission, but do think that the next administration, future charter revision commissions, and the state should take up exploring these.
If I may just quickly add on this point, we also appreciated that the recommendations that were put forward were not exhaustive in nature. And we had concerns about essentially doing one-off recommendations where we felt very strongly that each of these entities must be more, thoroughly examined with respect to what are the shortcomings when it comes to oversight. And so we did not want to shortchange the work that need to be done there, and that's why we are advancing in the final report that there must be more thorough and comprehensive review of these particular oversight bodies to bring forth the measures that are necessary to bring about the strengthened oversight that is so critical.
Absolutely. So I can move to the remainder, and then we can take questions afterwards, take comments afterwards if that works. So the second was enhancing accountability for racial equity. You should remember that we considered the creation of a racial equity watchdog, as well as stronger consequences for failure of agencies and entities to correct issues that have a racial equity impact. We do believe that we're setting a real foundation with the proposals, as discussed in last week's meeting, and as you'll see in the resolution today, But in time, there may be need for more. And so while we're not proposing right now that a watchdog be created or those consequences be put in place, we do want to go on record as a commission in saying that it may be necessary and want to ensure that they receive adequate consideration and tracking into the future. This may be a role that in fact the commission that we are proposing may play in terms of saying we need stronger enforcement that go beyond their power. So they may be able to act as an advocating body in that regards. But we wanted to put them down into our recommendations for the future to note that, you know, we've put in a system, we're recommending a foundation through our proposals, but we may need to go further. Third, around developing and implementing tools to measure racial equity. There are some things that we're doing in our proposal. Specifically, we have included setting under the Office of Racial Equity, setting standards for disaggregation of data as a responsibility of that office. And those standards would be sent to all city agencies, and there would be a coordination in compliance there. But there are other things that, you know, we discussed as a commission, have considered, and that there might be general support for, but with further details that would need to be worked out in order to be implemented. Particularly racial equity impact assessments, as well as racial equity scoring. Scoring could be applied in the context of budgets, budget requests. It could also be applied in the context of policy decisions. So what might be the impact? There could be a scoring mechanism for determining what that impact may be. Again, you know, we did hear general support from commissioners, but also a lot of concerns about how well fleshed out these ideas were at this point in time, what the precedent is, how well it's worked in other cities, and the desire to work out what the model might be further before committing to implementing it. So some of those conversations have happened in commission meetings as well as in individual conversations with commissioners. For under advancing community safety and reforming the criminal legal system, there are a number of things here that the commission considered earlier on. We certainly heard much from community members that criminal justice reform and community safety were priorities for them. But generally, there are some very large issues to tackle there within a very short period of time. And so we felt more comfortable putting them forth as recommendations for further work, recognizing that there is much work that is already underway and some processes in place that could address them. We had, for instance, considered a refined mission for the NYPD that really centers racial equity, justice, and fairness for all in terms of how they deliver their services. Potential restructuring of criminal justice agencies. This was a proposal that we had heard from many community members and some elected officials in terms of creating a Department of Public Safety that may oversee the NYPD. Those were things that were very large, and we felt that we didn't have the adequate time and space to address them meaningfully because there would need to be much work and much conversation to tackle those. There are some processes that are happening, particularly with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice around race and reconciliation in the coming year. So we look towards that process as a place where some of that work can happen. We also are advancing anti-marginalization work within the Office of Racial Equity, as well as within the citywide racial equity plans. But there may be some more specific things that we want to recommend, like an outright prohibition on unnecessary criminal bars or criminal background checks, including for jobs, housing, licensing, city contracts, as well as universal fair chance for those that are justice involved. So moving on to the final two, we heard a lot from community members around the city about civic engagement, civic participation, and community power. We heard about, support for non-citizen voting, which I understand the city council is voting on today, maybe right now. We also heard about community boards as a place that need to be rethought to be effective vehicles for civic participation. And we also, as a commission, have discussed that youth civic participation opportunities need to be supported and expanded. So those are some of the potential inclusions under expanding voting and community power. Lastly, and particularly in our recent public input sessions, we heard from many advocates who wanted us to explore making changes to how city land is used, particularly requiring or promoting community land trusts and community ownership. And the commission had also explored, but ultimately decided not to advance a reform of the city's fair share process, but do believe that there is critical work to be done there that should be taken up in the short term. So I leave that with all of you as commissioners. We're here to clarify anything, but I think all of this is up for discussion and up for your input. If anything is missing, if there's anything that you would change, are there particular things that the commission would want to put forth as hearing from the community as important and validating and want to put them in our recommendations? So looking forward to hearing your thoughts on these.
Excellent, thank you. We will begin the discussion process. I ask that commissioners recognize, help us to appreciate that you'd like to speak by raising your hand. If you are with us virtually, raise your hands, and I see we've already got a hand up, and so we'll get to you in just a minute. Commissioner Hamilton, I do want to acknowledge the presence of additional commission members. Commissioner Mata and Commissioner Bain, as well as Commissioner Davey, have joined us here at Henry Street. And additionally, Commissioner and Vice Chair and birthday man, Henry Garrido is also with us. Happy birthday, Commissioner, Vice Chair Garrido.
Happy birthday.
Glad you can join us.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, and even more glad that I'm not singing.
Thank you.
Glad to see you. So I'm going to turn first to Commissioner Hamilton, but I do want to just note that when you were speaking, Executive Director Vin Contraman, when you were speaking about the strengthening oversight of certain government bodies, as well as advancing community safety and reform in the criminal legal system. What I appreciate is that one of the proposals centering on the Racial Equity Office and work to be done to look at government policies and practices, operations and functions, given that these are government entities, they would be covered. They would fall under the umbrella
Absolutely.
and would fall under the jurisdiction, if you will, the domain of responsibilities for the Racial Equity Office. So it's not that they are being essentially given a, like carved out or given a pass on, addressing and bringing about greater racial equity in those offices and oversight bodies. This is just an additional undertaking that we think should be done. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Good deal. All righty, let us begin. I'm going to begin with Commissioner Hamilton. And I'm going to ask every commission member, not yet knowing who wants to speak, if I can ask you to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And then if we need to, we will circle back. I see the commissioner, and I'm just going to call out Commissioner Hamilton, then Commissioner Thompson has noted that he would like to speak, and we'll go from there. And then Commissioner Yu.
Thank you,
Please
Chair. Thank you, Executive Committee, for all this work. I'm sorry for the echo. I'm not sure how to address that, but I'll say the equity scoring, race equity scoring, I think should be in our, as one of our charter revision recommendations, not just in the roadmap map. I think that it is essential with regards to purporting values to measure it. And similar to how we fiscally score policies, I think if we really are committed to race equity, we should be scoring proposals as well as budgets in a routine, regular way. I think that the wherewithal to get it done is part of the task of the executive to begin with. The executive can be charged with coming up with the metrics and manner by which we can make absolute and comparative scoring on proposals related to anything that the city engages in as it relates to whether it's going to enhance or reduce equity. Last thing I want to say is that from a values perspective, it's important. I think it's essential. I think we have the wherewithal to get it done. And I don't think we should leave it to the discretion of administrations. That's why I think it needs to go into the charter. If these are our values, then it should be foundational regardless of administration. And it should have the political accountability of transparency of how you're going to score these policies, and voters can hold administrations accountable with this information.
Yes, I actually wanted to speak to that point as well, to argue that I think there are a number of things that have been mentioned that include disaggregating data, that include constructing a racial equity impact statement, as well as racial scoring, that fall under the category of monitoring, evaluation, and other language that the Racial Equity Office is being charged to do. And I forget the exact words, but we can pull them up. I think it's a mistake to this late in the process to try and be very specific about methodology. The previous speaker mentioned the way budgets are fiscally scored now. Actually, there's a big difference between how Moody's and Standard & Poor's score the same budget, because they have different methodologies, they value different things. And I think if we're going to do racial equity scoring, which I actually am in favor of, I would prefer a data-heavy process for determining scores. I would prefer a dynamic accounting approach that makes use of multivariate analysis of city spending in different categories over time and its effects on outcomes over time. So for example, measuring different kinds of social spending and whether or not it leads to reductions in, say, crime or violence or homelessness or other things over time that actually save money over time, where that can be demonstrated. And that is a dynamic that would require, in my opinion, a dynamic multivariate analysis over time. And then equity scores can have real legitimacy based on hard data. However, this is complicated stuff. I don't know how many people understood what I just said. And we have not had any conversation about it to really tease out what these different approaches would mean. And I think putting it before voters would be thoroughly confusing. And it takes a lot of work to actually construct such a dynamic and powerful tool, if it is going to be dynamic and powerful. And I think it should be, but that will take a lot of work, a lot of argument, a lot of explanation. So I support including it the way it is now, and then actually doing the work to win people over to such, a powerful tool in its specificity, once we know what it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Yu?
Thank you. I think my recommendation isn't necessarily framed to the 6. I I think one of the most compelling narratives that I heard that I was really deeply moved by were the stories of NYCHA residents talking about how the formerly incarcerated could not live there. And it just sounded so Kafkaesque to me. And I know that we can't address that because, you know, there are parameters. But I'm wondering, are there opportunities for us to include some of these recommendations so that that way we can ask our congressional leaders to be able to talk about this and bring it to the next level? Because we heard those stories really shaped, you know, our work, and they've changed us. And I think it, you know, I would like to figure out how do we hold other people's feet to the fire, because how do you get, you know, everybody needs housing. The road to building a life is having a roof over your head, having an address, getting a job. And so, you know, those stories really, you know, is deeply moving. And so I'd like to figure out how do we advocate for all those stories that we heard, and let's put together a list to say, here's what we're able to tackle, but here are all the things that you also need to tackle at the federal level. Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Are there any other commissioners who'd like to comment at this point? Okay, I'm going to begin with Commissioner Bain and then Commissioner Davey. And we've got to try to keep this to about 3 minutes each.
I'll be very short. Just in terms of testimony that was very compelling, that resonated, that I would love for us to address in some form when we talked about or heard the community speak about food injustice. And as you think about basic human rights of New Yorkers, when you think about that triangle of food, clothing, and shelter, because housing is coming up in the conversation, because it is central to survival. So just to echo the sentiment of things that we heard that were extremely compelling, that I don't see us in all the work that we've done, you know, we can't capture the universe, but I just want to highlight and underscore the fact that food over commodification and food insecurity, food injustice is something that I think is worth us not letting go of entirely. Thank you.
Commissioner Davey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to speak just briefly to two topics, both of which have been raised. One is the issue of racial equity scoring, and the second is the recommendations for strengthening oversight bodies. So to the issue of the racial equity scoring, I like Commissioner Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson, I agree with my fellow commissioner that it needs to be done. But like with Commissioner Thompson, I think we needs to go in at this point as a recommendation. And we need to do more extensive study. I'm afraid if we try to move now to include racial equity scoring, given that it is such a complex topic, it could be a heavy lift on the part of moving forward these the overall recommendations that we have for a vote in overall proposals we have for a vote in November 2022. And I wouldn't in this case want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. So I think we should take some time, make a strong recommendation about racial equity scoring, but take some time to make sure that we do it in a way that we can bring both the elected officials as well as the general public along. So that's one point. And then the second one, as to strengthening oversight bodies, particularly CCRB. As chair of CCRB, I clearly strongly support that going in as a recommendation. With luck, we'll have some further strengthening of the organization's oversight with a council vote, maybe even today, or certainly by the end of the week. That was voted out of committee to allow the CCRB to self-initiate complaints, which we think we strongly need in light of technological advancements. Being able to then self-initiate looking at patterns and practices, as well as having an MOU of some sort that supports CCRB having final authority over its disciplinary decisions, I think will go far to strengthen the work of this body. So I'm in strong support of those recommendations that have to do with oversight bodies as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Davey. Are there others who would like to comment at this point? Okay, we have kept within the time limitations that I put forward. What I do want commission members to appreciate is that as we move to a review and vote on the resolution, we will be walking through the resolution and the specific provisions. That's the time's up. Tell me I need to be quiet as well. We will be walking through the specific provisions of the resolution, and at that time, as we do, there will be an opportunity. If commission members would like to make proposed amendments to the resolution as it concerns racial equity scoring, or as it concerns the inclusion in the racial justice roadmap of provisions concerning housing, food, and justice, you will have an opportunity to do so during that time and during that process. And so we've heard your thoughts on the matter, and now we're going to move to act on the resolution itself. So want to walk you through some of the particulars concerning the resolution and the process. Commissioner Hamilton, yes.
So really quick, just a point of clarification with regards to the process. If there is something that was not put in the roadmap and not in the resolution, is there a point in which we can discuss?
Yes, what we are about to do is walk through the resolution, and then we will have opportunity for discussion. And if commission members want to make a proposed change, they can do so at that time. Right, but it's part of the resolution to vote on it. Right. So yes.
And again, just for clarity, even if an item's not included in the resolution, that's really my point of question. In addition, not an amendment.
So we're going to be voting on the proposals. And you have an opportunity, I'm looking at our council, as I understand it, you have an opportunity to make amendments to what is contained in the resolution. We're also going to be voting to move forward to include the racial justice roadmap in the final report. That vote exactly on the racial justice roadmap in the final report will come next week, the specifics of it, but you can voice what you would like to see presented in it.
Elaborate, if I could. Sorry, the echo got to me there. The commissioners will have the opportunity to propose an amendment to the resolution to add something or change something as it's written in the resolution. That amendment would be subject to all of the other commissioners voting to approve or reject it. If it was approved, it will be added to the resolution for a vote on the resolution as a whole. So there is the opportunity, as the chair said, to propose an amendment which would be considered by the body here and voted on one way or another, and then the resolution would move forward for a complete vote on the entire resolution, whether amended or non-amended.
I think we're good. All right, so we're going to move now to consider and vote on the resolution. The proposals being advanced for ballot measures will appear as one resolution. And then there is a component of the resolution that centers on the racial justice roadmap. The commission members have been provided with the resolution, and it should come as no surprise to anybody what the contents of the resolution are, because they embody the many meetings and discussions that have been had to date. It was determined that one resolution with all three proposals is the best path forward, considering that the way that we've approached this work is that, one of the proposals builds upon the next, and they work in tandem and in concert together. And so we're going to treat them as one resolution. I do want to make it clear that when it comes to the actual proposals turning into ballot measures and being on the New York City ballot in 2022, the measures will be individual in nature. But for our purposes, we are putting forth one resolution. The way that this will work is I'm going to read the resolution in its entirety for ensuring that the public at large has a complete appreciation for what's in it. We will read the resolution aloud in its entirety. I then will call for a motion to approve the resolution and then to have it seconded. After it has been motioned and seconded, we will then open the floor for discussion among the commissioners on the motion. Should any member of the commission determine that a modification or an amendment should be made on any aspect of the resolution, at that time, during discussion, the commissioner can make that known to the remainder of the commission. The commissioner would move to amend the resolution, and then it would have to be seconded, and then there would be discussion and a vote taken on it. If the motion to amend is approved, then we would amend the resolution to incorporate the amendment. If it is not approved, we'll move on to the next proposed amendment if there is one. Once all amendments, if there are any, are voted upon and discussion is concluded and there is a vote, we'll close the discussion and call the question on the resolution, amendments included if there are any, and then we will commence the vote. It will be a roll call vote where I will call on every commissioner individually and in alphabetical order. I'm gonna need some help with that. And each commissioner will be called on by their name to vote. When voting, each commissioner has the opportunity to make a statement or provide an explanation of their vote if they so choose, but be clear whether you are voting for or against the resolution. All votes will be recorded, yeas and nays, by the staff. At the end of the resolution vote, the staff will share the final vote count with me, and we will announce whether the resolution has passed, whether the yeas or the nays have carried it, along with the vote count. And we'll state that the resolution is approved or rejected. Are there any questions about the process? Okay. The resolution. Resolution of the 2021 New York City Racial Justice Commission, December 9th, 2021. Whereas the 2021 New York City Racial Justice Commission has conducted extensive public outreach, including holding numerous public input sessions, including sessions focused on and located in each borough of the city, as well as multiple virtual sessions, with one of those focused on hearing input from youth below the age of 24. And whereas the commission has heard and received written testimony from members of the public at those sessions in person and virtually, including from representatives of public interest and advocacy groups, civic and community organizations, elected officials, and local community residents. And whereas the commission has heard and received testimony from thought leaders through its series of Transforming Foundations issues panels. And whereas the commission has engaged community leaders in a series of conversations to solicit their input and ideas. And whereas the commission has solicited input and ideas and encouraged public comment from New Yorkers through a variety of methods and in multiple languages, including at community-based events, on the commission's website, and through various forms of social media. And whereas the commission has solicited comments and ideas from city agencies, including leadership and staff. And whereas the commission has reviewed the entire charter as part of the revision process. And whereas the commission staff prepared an interim staff report identifying from New Yorkers' testimony, written input, comments, and ideas 6 persistent areas of racial inequity across the city, including but not limited to: 1, inequity in quality services that promote social and emotional well-being. 2, inequity in work, advancement, and wealth building. 3, inequity within and across neighborhoods that inhibit thriving individuals, families, and communities. 4, marginalization and overcriminalization of communities of color. And 6, lack of enforcement and accountability of government and other entities. And whereas the commission directed staff to further research and analyze the underlying causes of the persistent inequities identified, as well as potential solutions, including those presented by the public. And Whereas after the release of the interim staff report, the commission engaged in a second round of public input sessions to solicit public input on the interim staff report and other planned areas of focus for the commission's work. And whereas a part of that public engagement, the commission hosted focus groups with social justice organizations to solicit their ideas and suggestions on solutions to address the 6 persistent inequities identified. And whereas at the commission's direction, the staff prepared and the commission considered multiple proposals to address the inequities identified. And whereas commissioners have noted the absence in the New York City Charter of a unifying statement that speaks directly to the spirit of the city, to the values that unite New Yorkers, and to a vision for the future. And whereas in charters and constitutions across the country and around the world, preambles often serve the function of unifying the people and creating an aspirational vision for the future. And whereas many members of the public and government officials have expressed a strong interest in the unifying and aspirational potential of a preamble, whereas over the past several months, including at public input sessions and through requests for submissions online, the commission has sought public input on the values that unite New Yorkers and the values that should guide New York City's government as it carries out its work. And whereas the commissioners have engaged in extensive discussions at public meetings and reviewed, edited, and whereas the commission has determined that a preamble would help unite the people of New York City around historical narratives which have shaped the city's common identity and the fundamental goals of the city, and would also serve as a guide to New York City's government as it carries out its work for and on behalf of all New Yorkers. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the New York City Racial Justice Commission hereby directs the staff to prepare a proposal or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 8th, 2022, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Add a preamble to the New York City Charter that will serve as a unifying statement of the values of New Yorkers. Ensure the preamble includes a strong aspirational vision for an equitable city, an acknowledgement of the displacement of the original Lenape inhabitants from the land that now comprises New York City, and an acknowledgement of historical wrongs that have caused and continue to cause harm, and an intention to reconstruct, revise, and reimagine our city's foundations, structures, institutions, and laws to promote justice and equity for all New Yorkers in the aim of repairing these past and continuing harms. And in addition to its symbolic and unifying value, provide that the values in the preamble must inform and guide the actions of city agencies and offices in carrying out their mandates under the charter, including planning, programmatic reviews, and audits, and the preparation of agency-specific and citywide racial equity plans. And programmatic reviews and audits must examine the extent to which such values have been fulfilled through the policies and programs of city agencies and officers, and provide that the preamble will not create any private rights of action. Whereas in its public testimony and submissions, the public, including local and national thought leaders and academics, recommended and or advocated for the inclusion of a racial equity framework or analysis in decision-making and policy development, especially in budgeting and capital planning. And whereas the commission received compelling testimony and submissions from leaders and representatives of city agencies and from the city's task force on racial inclusion and equity about the challenges of integrating racial equity into decision-making and policy development, and the need for technical assistance to facilitate effective consideration, coordination, and application of racial equity principles into city government. And whereas the commission has determined that the establishment of a racial equity office would help to embed the values of racial equity into the charter and provide opportunities and assistance to city agencies and offices to integrate racial equity considerations into the city's planning and budgeting processes in a more systemic way, thereby prioritizing meaningful consideration of racial equity throughout the operation of city government. And whereas the commission received compelling testimony regarding the importance of ensuring that government is proactive and responsive to community needs when setting priorities and developing policies and practices aimed at furthering racial equity and justice. And whereas the commission received compelling testimony that the absence of meaningful government accountability could undermine the effectiveness of efforts to integrate racial equity considerations into city government policies and processes. And whereas the commission has determined that a racial equity commission would serve as a vehicle to identify New York City communities' priorities for racial equity and justice, as well as provide opportunities for ongoing community oversight to increase government accountability through the tracking and measurement of quantitative outcome indicators, including the assessment of year-over-year performance on or achievement of stated priorities and goals. Now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Racial Justice Commission hereby directs the staff to prepare a proposal or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 8th, 2022, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following. Establish a racial equity office led by the city's chief equity officer. Ensure that a secure and adequate level of funding for the Racial Equity Office is provided for in the charter, and provide that the Racial Equity Office shall be responsible for the following functions: technical assistance and partnership to agencies to support their capacity to engage in meaningful equity analysis and planning. Oversight of and technical assistance for the creation of agency-specific and citywide biennial racial equity plans as set forth in the Racial Equity Plan portion of this resolution. Staffing and providing administrative support for a permanent task force on racial inclusion and equity, comprising leaders from across city agencies who will function as an interagency coordinating body for citywide racial equity policy development and implementation, including incorporation into city capital and expense budgeting. Working to ensure alignment between the most recently issued equity goals and strategies from the citywide equity plan and the annual capital and expense budget. Building a program to improve equitable access to city programs and services through focus on service design and expanded focus on plain English language access and removing other barriers to access. Coordinating collection and reporting of data and indicators related to equity, particularly the tracking of performance and outcome indicators to assess progress on the citywide equity plan and the setting of standards for the disaggregation of data to allow the city and public to track racial disparity across the city and in its neighborhoods, and supporting city agencies in prioritizing the development of policies and practices aimed at reversing the marginalization of individuals and communities, including through addressing wage, occupational segregation, and equitable hiring and promotion, providing access to services, information, and decision-making for all New Yorkers, regardless of language, ability, education, time availability, or expertise. Limiting the use of criminal history and background checks, except where necessary as demonstrated. Identifying and employing alternatives to punitive enforcement, and prioritizing resources and services into neighborhoods with the greatest need and deepest disparity. Mandate the development by the mayor of a citywide biennial racial equity plan to incorporate agency-specific racial equity plans. Provide that the citywide racial equity plan shall consider and be informed by the values identified in the preamble to the New York City Charter. Establish strategic priorities, goals, and programs in pursuit of equity and racial justice. Document efforts by city agencies to repair the marginalization of individuals and communities. Include identification and mapping of needs-based priority neighborhoods and neighborhood-specific goals for equitable distribution of burdens and benefits. Be coordinated with and subject to a specified timeline and release data aligned with the city's budget process, beginning no earlier than the 2024 budget cycle, and be submitted to the Racial Equity Commission and publicly released. Establish a Racial Equity Commission led by a chair and supported by a full-time staff and with a secure budget. Establish that the Racial Equity Commission shall have an appointment structure that includes mayoral and non-mayoral appointments, and be composed of community members who are resident in New York City, with particular consideration for appointment given to those with expertise and/or lived experience focused on racial equity and identified disciplines and subject matters. Provide that the Racial Equity Commission shall have the ability to propose priorities for racial equity in city decision-making and policymaking, and assess performance towards those priorities, including through the following functions: proposing community-focused priorities and outcome indicators for the Racial Equity Plan, tracking compliance with equity plan submission requirements, reviewing and reporting on the racial equity plans for adequacy and effectiveness, reviewing progress reports and indicators to ensure accountability of outcomes, and revising proposed priorities, exercising proactive accountability powers to track agency compliance and provide a public accounting, exercising reactive accountability powers, including ability to receive complaints, and providing for wide-ranging community accountability, including collaboration and partnership, and public transparency and reporting. Whereas commenters expressed serious concerns about the unaffordability of the city, and whereas the lack of shared standards to assess the true state of self-sufficiency among New Yorkers makes it difficult to create accountability to address the patterns of inequity in work, advancement, and wealth building. And whereas the federal poverty line creates an inaccurate and misleading perception of the needs of New Yorkers and the adequacy of wages. And whereas the commission has determined that the establishment of a more accurate measure would allow the city of New York to properly assess the self-sufficiency of its population and inform its programmatic and policy decisions. Now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Racial Justice Commission hereby directs the staff to prepare a proposal or portion of a proposal to be placed before the voters at the general election to be held on November 8th, 2022, if adopted by the commission, consistent with the following: mandate the development and creation of a new and additional indicator to measure the true cost of living in New York City by capturing the minimum costs of housing, childcare, food, and other essential goods. Mandate the annual reporting of this indicator to provide critical data to better assess the true state of self-sufficiency among New Yorkers and thereby inform programmatic decisions and service needs. And whereas the commission has recognized that it will not be possible to advance ballot proposals to address all of the many other proposed solutions to the 6 inequities that were surfaced and considered during its extensive public engagement process. And whereas the commission has determined that many of the proposed solutions have significant open questions worthy of and requiring further study in order to determine their feasibility. Now therefore be it resolved that the New York City Racial Justice Commission hereby directs the staff to carefully address those proposals that the commission has determined to be worthy of further study in a racial justice roadmap to be included in the final report, with a recommendation that they be considered by a future charter revision commission or other executive or legislative body. And be it further resolved that the New York City Racial Justice Commission directs the staff to prepare a final report and ballot questions and abstracts consistent with the foregoing directives and with such further amendments as may be deemed necessary and appropriate by the chair with notice to the commissioners, and provided further that such final report and ballot questions and abstracts cumulatively reflecting the commission's proposals shall be submitted to the commission for consideration of whether to place such proposals before the voters at the general election to be held on November 8th, 2022. That is the resolution. And so now we will move to the process of considering the resolution. First, I will call for a motion to approve the resolution and then to have it seconded, and then to move us into discussion. And before I do that, I just want to quickly acknowledge the presence of the Henry Street Settlement Executive Director, David Garza, who is a friend to many commission members and to the human services sector and to the city on the whole. Thank you for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to present to the New York City community the resolution for achieving racial justice here in New York City.
Madam Chair, I make the motion that we accept the resolution.
First meeting of the NAACP was literally held right next door. Of course, 265 Henry Street, 1909.
Wow.
The alignment is perfect. We're grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Executive Director Garza. So I will now call for, let me just again remind everybody how this process is going to work. I'm going to call for a motion to approve the resolution and then to have it seconded. And then we will move into discussion on the proposals being advanced. As I said, and as you heard, they appear as one resolution. The way that we will work through the discussion is that we will open the floor and have commissioners examine one proposal at a time. So first we will center on the preamble. Then we will move to a discussion focused on the Racial Equity Office and Commission, and center on the true measure, the true cost of living measure. And then fourthly, we'll have a conversation about the racial justice roadmap. I want everybody to be mindful of the time. This, I presume will not be a lengthy process because these proposals have been put forth time and time again. Presenting for discussion, any thoughts, comments that you have, that you keep your comments to no longer than 2 minutes. We need to vote on this resolution. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved. Madam Chair, this
Commissioner
is
Davey has
Vice
moved.
Chair.
May I have a second? Seconded the motion. We will now have a discussion, beginning with the preamble. Is there any commission member that would like to make a statement, put forth a proposed modification or amendment to the preamble as it has been presented? I see that we have Commissioner Garrido and then Commissioner Mata. So if I may hear first from Commissioner Garrido, and then we will move to Commissioner Mata.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope that you can hear me, and I hope that everybody's okay. I apologize, I'm not there. I'm there in spirit right now. But I wanted to speak about the preamble because it's such an important aspect of the proposed changes that we're making. Because it seems to me that it's quite astonishing that in a city with as rich a history as we have in New York, we don't have a preamble that unifies the values and the principles by which not only was our city formed, but has been operating under. And I think that this is one of the biggest steps. If you look at, for instance, the United States Constitution's preamble, there has been so much debate about what it does and what it doesn't do, and how much of a person, when its inception, when it was first created, it actually ascertained value to people as if they were objects, and good or bad or indifferent, it began a process by which you discuss a unifying statement of values. And I think that one of the best aspects of the processes of this commission has been the proposal preamble, and I'm in full support of that. Thank you.
Commissioner Mata?
I will take less than a minute. I just want to say that I'm very excited that we are going to have a preamble the first time ever here in New York City, one of the most diverse cities in the world. So I just feel like this is helping us get to the next level. And I I love the term that was used, like New Yorkers, right? I think New Yorkers include everyone, whether you're Latino, African American, whatever type of background, but also that is inclusive to those that are undocumented, that are immigrants that come to the city. So I think I love that how New Yorkers was used. Is more of a comment. I think would also be helpful in the report, in somewhere in the report, to just include that New Yorkers include immigrants, and that status is not, doesn't define a New Yorker, that we are all New Yorkers. So I think it's more of a comment, but I'm really excited about the preamble and that we're finally going to be having a constitution for New York City.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
I would just like to recommend a sentence or two be added to the preamble, highlighting the history of New York as a center for the fight for racial justice and equity historically, on whose shoulders we stand, and bring out that positive part of New York's history. Henry Highland Garnett, who issued the appeal to slaves to rise up and overthrow slavery. Henry Highland Garnett was a Presbyterian minister in Harlem in the 1840s. The NAACP, as was just mentioned, was founded next door. The Statue of Liberty has chains at the feet because it was funded by abolitionists, mainly from France, who, in celebration of the heroic role of American people in destroying slavery. That is what the Statue of Liberty was actually funded to symbolize. And I just think we are in New York. We stand on the shoulders of Ella Baker and so many others that we should just acknowledge that in a sentence or two in our preamble.
Very much appreciated. Commissioner Daniel Lurie, Commissioner Lurie Daniel Favors.
Good evening, everyone, and hello to all who are in attendance, both virtual and in person. I just want to note for the record that while I am clear and that our staff have painstakingly explained the rules through which we had to agree to have a preamble, I will note that I am excited about the preamble. I think this is fantastic, but I am concerned that the preamble is used or is framed as an informative component, as a guiding component for the actions of city agencies. I think one thing that we have seen over the course of our several months together and throughout the hearings and the presentations and the testimony that we have heard is that we have no shortage of good laws. We have no shortage of regulations on the books that speak to these issues. What we lack is enforcement. And I recognize again that we were not able to create a private right of action with the preamble, but I do wish, and I want to state for the record, that our preamble would do more than simply inform and guide, and that it would be a form of construction to which decisions being made by agencies would have to adhere beyond informing and beyond guiding their directions. I do wish that we were able to restrict those actions and decisions at the agency level so that they were in alignment with the preamble and not just an informative or a guidance piece. I do recognize that this is something that will require additional work, and I'm just stating this for the record now because it is my hope that those to whom we will pass this, assuming these ballot measures pass, knock on wood, that they would take that battle up as well, and that they would also seek to inform, or I should say strengthen, the preamble so that it is more than just an informative notion, it is more than a guide, and it is more than a statement of values, that it is actually setting out the rules of construction through which agency decision-making will actually be evaluated, excuse me. Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Commissioner Coy.
Yeah, I feel very emotional about the whole preamble because it's like, in a way, this is like finally a recognition of the Asian Americans, experience of New York City, and then helping the city to develop and grow, and that we're no longer invisible in many ways. So I think that for the past couple of years, it's like there's all the anti-Asian violence that's happening, taking place. a lot of it is like, people in the community saying that, we've always been treated as a foreigner, right? That we're not really part of the city or the country. And for a preamble of New York City recognizing the contributions of everyone, right? Including Asian Americans, that this is really significant. It's a moral standing authority, for us to continue to build the city and then to fight for our rights. And then also work with everyone to build a stronger community. So I just, really feel that this is something that for the Asian American community is very, very significant.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Coyne. Are there other commission members who'd like to comment on the preamble? I'm going to turn to our general counsel. Our Commissioner Thompson suggested that we add a sentence or two highlighting New York City as a center, the historical center for racial equity. That is not the necessary language, but we need to work up a amendment if he'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution to include, if he wants to officially make a motion to do so, then we will hear that and second it, and we'll see if we have any discussion on it.
I'd like to make a motion to recognizing New York as a center of the fight for racial justice and equity over centuries, and that this commission continues to work in that tradition and stand on the shoulders of the many who have come before us.
I second.
All right. Any discussion? Any questions? So before we move to a vote, I want to know if our general counsel has, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hamilton, please.
Just a quick question or maybe clarification. I like the amendment a lot and recognizing that certain individuals, but I want to be careful that we don't want to misrepresent the city in totality as always being a beacon of racial justice. So I guess we can massage the language to make that clear.
Friendly, I don't want to give the impression that we've achieved it. I want to convey that we've been a center of the fight for it. So I appreciate that.
Language concerning a resolution in order to be able to vote on it. Do you have language for us, General Counsel?
I think we would just add a bullet point. Let's say, I'm looking at where we're next to it, ensure the preamble includes, and then there are sub bullets, strong aspirational vision for an equitable city, an acknowledgement of the displacement of the original Lenape inhabitants. And then under that, we could say a recognition of New York City as a center of the fight for racial equity and justice. And acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of those New Yorkers who were active in that fight. Is that a fair way to say it, Commissioner Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson?
Clear on the amendment, the proposed amendment. And keep in mind that the specific language will appear in the final report, in the final ballot measure that we'll vote on next week, but we understand what is being put forward. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yeah, again, I just want to get more clarity. There's certain individuals in New York that have championed it, but I wonder, are we saying that the city itself has been the beacon of racial justice? Because the latter, the former I'm supportive of, the latter I'm not so sure is the case.
That directly above that we're going to be, acknowledges the historical wrongs that have taken place and that continue to cause harm. So I think this wouldn't supplant that. It would just be a different acknowledgement that would be included as well.
And efforts of individuals and institutions, but not not all inclusive. a good appreciation for this, this change. If you would, once again, Melanie, just read what we would add to this resolution, so everybody is clear, and then we'll move to a vote.
This is, but I should clarify that this is not, need not be the exact language that would be in the preamble. There will be obviously opportunities that the commissioners will have a chance to see that before voting on that. But this is a recognition of content that the commissioner is interested in, if they approve this amendment, is interested in having included in the draft charter that they, or the draft preamble that they will vote on. So the language is, after the bullet point that says add an acknowledgement of the displacement of the original Lenape inhabitants from the land that now comprises New York City, and an acknowledgement of historical wrongs that have caused and continue to cause harm, semicolon, and recognition of New York City as a center of the fight for racial equity and justice, an acknowledgement that we stand on the shoulders of those New Yorkers who have engaged in that fight.
The proposed amendment, I ask for a vote by roll call. Do I have to do this alphabetically? Thank you. All right. I can alphabetize, but not on the fly, if I don't have to. So we are voting on the proposed amendment, and I'm going to do a roll call vote beginning, and please just indicate yay or nay, beginning with Commissioner Bain.
Yay.
Commissioner Bermudez,
Yay.
Commissioner Daniel Favors,
Yay.
Commissioner Davy, Commissioner Garrido,
Yay.
Commissioner Hamilton,
I'm going to abstain, sorry, on the way it's written, if that's a possibility. I'm for it. I know you don't want a yay or nay, but I'm for it if it's institutions and individuals, but the city as a whole, I don't think is necessarily the case. So if that, as read, I want to say nay.
it is institutions and individuals.
Then yay.
Commissioner Jones Austin, yay. Commissioner Coy?
Yes.
Commissioner Mata? Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Yu? The amendment has been approved. Are there any other proposed amendments or modifications to the preamble? Hearing and seeing none, we will move to the proposal to establish the Office of Racial Equity and the commission.
Madam Chair, I believe there is an additional request related to the
Oh.
preamble from Commissioner Hamilton.
I apologize. Commissioner,
I apologize. This was the next one. I thought we had moved on. So I apologize. We're right.
going to consider the racial equity accountability proposal, specifically the Office of Racial Equity and the Racial Equity Commission. May I have a motion to approve this proposal? Oh, we don't have to motion. No, I'm sorry. I forgot.
So we just need to call, see if there's any discussion on the
Good deal.
proposal and
And
any
then if we need an
amendments.
amendment. Good deal. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Hamilton.
So here's where I think we need two amendments, and I feel strongly about that. I think that we could improve this resolution with some more accountability. So there are two amendments that I would like to bring up as a vote separately. One involves explicitly bringing race equity scoring into our recommendation for charter revisions. We had some discussion earlier, the concerns around it being complicated. I think that the charge of the executive is to overcome those complications. And those complications, in fact, would be somewhat analogous if we were to go forward with things like changing the ways in which we measure cost of living. All types of measurement oftentimes involves nuance and complication. Dynamic scoring should absolutely be part of what we do with race equity. But if we want to value something, I think New York City should be on the vanguard and lead in putting a measurement behind the value of race equity. If we don't, I think we are not putting forth some of the accountability that's necessary. I think it's not new. It's been talked about amongst us, and there is some leadership in doing so. In fact, it's part of the president's executive order, the first one that the new president actually put out, not obviously a constitutional amendment, but it included accountability and at least consideration around race equity scoring. I can talk about the second amendment, but I wonder if it's appropriate to go to that one or just pause here.
Why don't we begin with this one first, because they would be acted upon individually. And members who at this time would like to comment upon this particular proposal to amend the resolution and the proposal concerning an Office of Racial Equity to establish racial equity scoring as a requirement of the office. We heard earlier from commission members. Is there any commission member who would like to comment further at this time?
I have a question. Is the proposal that is the proposed amendment, Commissioner Hamilton, that to add to the responsibilities of the Racial Equity Office to develop a race equity scoring to be used, or so that's where I'm not clear.
That would be, there are many.
We can't hear you.
I was going to say there are many places it could fit, but yes, that could be a place in which, given the template that we put forth, where I think it could be readily amendable to add that as part of the task and duties.
I have a question as well.
Commissioner Daniel Favors.
Thank you. I wonder, I know that we are time limited, but I am wondering if we are able to hear from the staff specifically with regard to the provisions that speak to accountability within this particular proposal.
Concerning the racial equity scoring.
Yes, ma'am. Or the concerning. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, my mute button has a delay function. Specifically with the Racial Equity Office's capacity for engaging in accountability measures.
And I just want to be clear concerning specifically racial, because we're talking about racial equity scoring right now. Okay. Director Pan and Director.
Was it, hello, was it confirmed? We're talking about scoring still?
Yes.
The staff has looked into it, and the office right now does not, as proposed here, undertake that racial equity scoring. To answer Commissioner Daniel Favors' question, what it does do is begin to set forth indicators which the city will track the programmatic success of its its efforts, its programs, its resources. I think that is the start to a broader system that would contemplate scoring the budget itself against outcomes, anticipated or not. But we haven't put it in here, partly because of the complexity and partly because we think that laying this foundation would allow for the office to then collaborate with Office of Management and Budget to develop that sort of more direct scoring program. And I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but.
It does in part. I guess my follow-up would be then, am I correct in understanding that, and this is alluding to the proposal submitted by Commissioner Hamilton, am I correct in understanding that then this office is really more charged with monitoring and observing as it pertains to its functions, as opposed to engaging in corrective action?
So there would be two components to this proposal. So the office is the portion of this proposal that sets out what the city's equity plan and strategy would be and develops those indicators. The second component of the proposal is the Racial Equity Commission, which firstly suggests priorities for the commission or for the office to incorporate into the city's plans, and then reviews the output of those plans. So looking at quantified indicator data to see how the city's performing, reviewing the city's strategies, reviewing that output, and providing a vehicle for the community to really see the performance, and as well issuing statements to that effect. And so that is almost a fertile ground for that type of scoring that Commissioner Hamilton is proposing. You know, it's the start of that, if that makes sense.
It does. I guess if there's nothing specific within the resolution that speaks to the need to move towards that type of scoring, and we've already we were not able to successfully maintain the check on the city budget. My fear is that if we don't have some sort of explicit statement, then we're going to end up having a really powerfully well-written series of reports and observations that don't have any meaningful capacity to mandate change in the way that the city is functioning. If we don't have the check on the budget, if we don't have some sort of scoring mechanism recognizing the complexities as has already been discussed, it just feels to me that we may be in a position where we are creating a set of bodies that will have observation faculties, but no real stick to accompany the carrots or any, there's no teeth. There's not sufficient enough bite, it would seem to me.
I think that's an appreciable point, but let's keep in mind that racial equity scoring alone, I mean, depending upon whether or not you're looking at policies, you're looking at budgeting, that alone does not necessarily create the enforceability mechanism. You can track it, but that doesn't mean that you create enforceability with it. And I think that that is one of the concerns that is being generated at this point, that you can put it down there, but if you do not have a full appreciation of, you know, the enforceability mechanisms, and it's not more thoroughly studied, then it too just becomes another thing on a piece of paper. Other commission members who have comments? Commissioner Thompson.
Yeah, on page 4, I think where it says coordinating collection and reporting of data and indicators related to equity, particularly the tracking of performance and outcome indicators to assess progress on the citywide equity plan, et cetera. I think that allows for racial equity scoring. I think that is, it doesn't say here are the specific mechanisms or methodologies we will use, but it is authorizing and calling for such methodologies to be created. I suggest leaving it at that level because I don't think if asked, what is racial equity scoring? I think if we asked each commission member at this point, we'd get a different answer because we've reached no consensus on even what the methodologies should or would be. And they are complicated and I don't, so that's my point. I actually think we should move that way, but I think we should, as Commissioner Davies said earlier, have everyone on board with us. Second point I didn't make as clearly, I favor a data heavy approach and want more work and discussion on this because I believe that racial equity is actually fiscally responsible. And it takes data to show that providing funding for community health on the front end in low-income communities of color actually saves money on the other end. But I think those kinds of arguments can be made in addition to just tracking how much money we're putting in for racial equity for community health. We can also track outcomes and show, and I think win the public more support for these kinds of measures. So that's, I think we have an opportunity to do something even more than track, but make arguments that would be persuasive in budget discussions as a whole. I just don't think we've had the time or the ability to dig into these nuances as part of this process yet. And but we have a language that allows and authorizes.
Okay. Commissioner Coy and then Commissioner Garrido.
I just want to express, I'm like, favoring what Commissioner Thompson is talking about, because I think that, this whole scoring methodology system, it is a little bit at least for myself, I have different interpretation, or understanding, So then I think that it is not a necessary prudent thing to kind of just put it in and then kind of narrowcast ourselves, into it. So I think that I would kind of support what Commissioner Thompson's framework on this.
Commissioner Garrido?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you so much. I would suggest the following. I would not support an amendment to this that would create a measuring stick where the same agency that's supposed to implement it is supposed to promulgate the rules by which you score it. I think that's an inherent conflict if we're going to be sure. And I would not support an amendment that would mandate a scoring mechanism without knowing what the scoring mechanism would be. I think you could do a greater disservice, if you will, to the big issue that we tackle here, which is the issue of inequity, because there are accountability measures of measuring formulas have been used for decades to try to justify inequities. And if the whole purpose of us getting together was to, as part of the commission, was to review inequities, if we're going to establish a mechanism by which agencies are going to be monitoring themselves, I would not support that. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
Chair, I was going to call a question on the amendment. I think we
Yes, I
now
was just about to-
repeating ourselves, so
I was just about
I'd like to call a question.
So Commissioner Hamilton, other commissioners have commented upon your amendment. I am asking you if you'd like to withdraw your amendment, keep your amendment as it is. Would you like to modify it based on what you've heard?
I'd like to modify it and bring it to a vote.
Modified language?
I believe that Commissioner Thompson identified a place in the resolution in which it can fit. So where he identified on page 4, I would like to add that the charge includes a race equity scoring of activities around legislation and budgets as part of the work of the Race Equity Office.
You
Chair, I'm sorry.
would like just want to restate it to make sure we have it for the record. An amendment for racial equity scoring on legislation and budgeting on an agency by agency basis?
Proposed legislation and budgeting as part of the work of that Race Equity Office that's identified.
So I just want to again, like,
Sentence with the additional words so that we can make sure we're capturing them correctly, Commissioner Hamilton?
And of course, it's a little tricky to get the exact wording on the fly, which I guess we all can appreciate. But the sentiment of that part of the charge of the executive committee is to come up when they're in their charter proposals that the Race Equity Office be charged with race equity scoring as it relates to budgeting and legislative proposals in which the city is engaged.
yes. So you're saying the executive branch's proposal of legislation, essentially?
Yes, I'll settle for that. Yep.
Does everybody understand the resolution amendment that has been put forward?
Madam Chair, point of order. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to ask for us to take a vote. If a motion has been made, there needs to be a second for that motion to be considered. If there is no second, it dies before consideration.
Okay. I thought we moved. Okay. So is there a motion, Commissioner Hamilton, are you're making a motion to amend the resolution as stated? Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Garrido, are you second?
That was Commissioner Marie Daniel Favors. I second the motion.
Very good. Okay, we will now call for a vote. And I am going to take the liberty of reversing the order so as to not to put Commissioner Bain on the spot at every turn. Commissioner Yu. Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Mata. Commissioner Coy.
No.
I say no. Commissioner Hamilton.
Yay.
Commissioner Garrido.
No.
Commissioner Davy. Commissioner Daniel Favors.
Yay.
Commissioner Bermudez. Commissioner Bain. I believe, is that a 6-5?
I was having trouble distinguishing between whether
You
people were
was-
saying
okay,
nay
you-
or yay. I could,
Say it, okay,
because
we'll
the
do it
quality
again.
of the Zoom was tough.
Yes or no, Commissioner Yu? Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Mata? Commissioner Coy? Commissioner Jones Austin is a no. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrido?
No.
Commissioner Davy? Commissioner Daniel Favors?
Yes.
Commissioner Bermudez? Commissioner Bain? All right, I believe that is a 6-5. It's a 6-5 with no. So the amendment does not pass. The second amendment that you'd like us to consider, Commissioner Hamilton?
This is also in the vein of accountability. And this is that audits, routine audits are performed to proactively detect discrimination. I think that we as a commission can do something else that's very practical to redress discrimination beyond just reaction to claims, but proactively going out and monitoring with one of the best mechanisms of detecting discrimination, which is audits. An auditing system, and I can give more details about what I mean by auditing. I think it's been brought up before, but auditing as it relates to the city practices in employment, city practices in service delivery, as well as product delivery, and those entities in which the city contracts with. So direct auditing to see if indeed there are patterns of discrimination in hiring or service provisions would be something that would really strengthen the city's ability to make sure that we have an environment that does not discriminate and go along with the accountability. And having this in place, the randomness about it also is useful to make sure that people are engaging in good practices, knowing that there very well might be some accountability if systematic evidence is uncovered. So I propose that be added to the duties of the commission, and that a budgetary commitment to perform this activity is also included.
Good deal. I just want to make sure, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we're getting the rules correct. So, General Counsel, does the discussion occur before the motion and the seconding?
So I think Mr. Henry Garrido is probably the expert on Robert's Rules of Order, but I would say that we would need a seconder to have a discussion on the amendment.
And it appears in the papers. So the motion is to make an amendment to the resolution to provide for the commission to have the authority to conduct audits.
The responsibility to conduct audits, sorry. Yeah.
Responsibility. Okay. So you're making that motion. Is that motion seconded?
Did you say the commission or the racial equity office?
Commission or Racial Equity Office?
And to be honest, I'm open to both entities having that possibility. So if my commissioners are swayed by one having it fitting in one or the other, that would be suitable to me. It's the activity that I think is really important.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll now have discussion, and what I will do is first make sure that everyone is aware that the preamble, that one of the provisions of the preamble will provide for audits to be conducted by city agencies and by other city offices and officials. And so there is an auditing function that it will be in the preamble. There's an auditing clause in the preamble that will essentially dictate that audits must, should be conducted or required, I think. That's the way that it would present. So it's already there is an element that speaks to auditing in the preamble to be carried out by city agencies and officials.
Madam
It's
Chair. I
not in
have
the
a-
preamble itself, it's in the effectuating language for the preamble.
Yes.
So, and it speaks to the fact that whenever an audit is being undertaken, it shall examine whether the conduct that's being examined is fulfilling the values set out in the preamble. So as the chair mentioned, there is a way in which the values of the preamble are being brought into, and an equity is being brought into any audit that is being performed.
As mentioned in the preamble section of the resolution.
Yes. Commissioner Garrido.
Yeah, I have a question. I thought we were not there on the part regarding the commission. I thought we were talking about right now the specific duties of the racial equity office. Or am I mistaken?
We were looking at them as both. It's the racial equity accountability. But the first point was made specifically to the racial equity office.
Okay, then can I ask for clarification, since Commissioner Hamilton offered the ability to have the audit function in both? I think that's very different application. Whereas one would envision the office, the racial equity office, to have staff that will be able to be assigned to this thing, and the commission may have less staff or less resources. If we could kindly clarify which of the two areas we are finding this responsibility to do, that would be helpful to me. Thank you.
So I'm happy to respond. To me, it seems like the commission might be the better place because there's some layer of independence. So it would require that the commission receive, in addition, the staffing and the resources necessary to carry out the audits. And then, just as a point of clarification, by audits, beyond the preamble, I'm talking about testers as well, to literally send out either testers in the form of resumes or the testers in form of actors to examine if they are treated the same as others, regardless of race, gender, or other equity concerns that we may have.
Understood. Okay.
Once again, I really resonate with the spirit of my colleague in what he's proposing. But I'm really concerned about burdening these set of proposals with such additional and perhaps overlapping responsibilities with other agencies in the city, that we're going to have city officials lobbying against these proposals being approved by the charter. The city controller has responsibility for considerable auditing functions in the city. And I just wonder if we could not put this in the recommendations that the Office of the Controller develop a fairly sophisticated approach to doing the level of racial auditing that my fellow commissioner is recommending, so as not to, again, unduly weight this work with these other functions that could and perhaps should have their life in existing city agencies and existing city functions. I'm just so fearful we're going to end up with city officials feeling like city officials lobbying against the approval of our proposals.
Thompson?
I just want to agree with Commissioner Davies' approach. Number one, certain agencies have audit authority now, including MWBE, has auditing authority on city contracts. And it's not clear whether this would be overlapping with a number of different existing agency functions. Secondly, in my experience, what to audit is actually a big question, and that actually gets into, do agencies have diversity officers who monitor certain things all the time and bring it to the attention of some other body so one would even know what to audit in the context of tens of thousands of contracts, for example. And Commissioner Davies' main point, which is the comptroller's office is empowered to do this as their main function now. And I think there's a language which includes the comptroller saying the comptroller is responsible for ensuring that the values embodied in the preamble are actually applied. And the comptroller has all kinds of powers to do all kinds of investigations if they so warrant. And now this is authorizing them and in fact requiring them to take this into consideration. So anyway, I think I agree with Commissioner Davey. I think it should be in the recommendations. If we direct the comptroller, or at least recommend that the comptroller develop methodologies, et cetera, I think that would be sufficient. And actually more powerful than trying to create other things where we have a strong body with a staff, money, organization, et cetera, to do that.
Commissioner Garrido? Not sure. Commissioner Garrido, is your hand up?
Sorry about that, Chair. Apologies. That was from before.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Having heard, is there another, Commissioner Hamilton? Having heard from your fellow commissioners, their thoughts and concerns, would you like to withdraw, modify, or advance your proposed amendment as is?
I would like to advance it for a vote. I again feel strongly that I think we could benefit from more accountability. I think that this is not necessarily investigation, but rather proactive mechanisms that are not at the discretion of particular comptrollers, but put into the values of our charter and becomes routine and again, proactive, which is the key word why I think we need to bring it to a vote and ultimately get it into the charter.
Understood. I will just, again, make my comment that the way that the preamble is constructed, it provides for auditing functions as performed by the authorities and institutions that have that responsibility as is, and to be responsive to the preamble and what the preamble lays out by way of driving and advancing equity. I, like Commissioners Thompson and Davey, do have concerns about the added burden that you put on a commission that is just getting started, and that is of the, essentially a community-led commission, and the an exploration of how this would work, and it could actually work against us. So you've heard my comments. You're talking about the proposal as is to establish an auditing function for the commission, the Racial Equity Commission. We will now move to, Commissioner Daniel Favors.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point of clarification. Does the language in the preamble contemplate a permissive capacity to engage in audits or a requirement?
Requires the and I don't have the language before me, but essentially the intent of the language is to ensure that every city agency and office and official move to adapt adopt, I should say, adopt, program and policy and operational functions to carry out the aims of the preamble. And so if if the city controller has auditing function responsibility, then the city controller will have to implement auditing functions that ensure that the preambles, provisions are being carried out by city agencies.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Daniel Favors to the, to page 3 of the resolution, under this bullet, in addition to its symbolic and unifying value, the second bullet underneath talks about the way in which the audit functions would be impacted by the values of the preamble.
Thank you for that. I see that language. I appreciate that.
No further comments, hands raised. We're going to move up. Commissioner Bermudez.
Clarification for process. Can I make my comment before casting my vote? Or do I need to make it now?
Vote, and it's just, essentially comment as you make the vote. You're fine with waiting. You don't have to make it now.
So, that's fine. Then I'll wait.
So we will now go once again in alphabetical order. Commissioner Bain.
Madam Chair, was there a second?
I'm excited about the idea of a race equity scorecard. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions. I know that this has been alluded to, pointed to by different agencies, various agencies around New York. It just has never happened.
Right now on the auditing.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay.
So the short version is I'm saying yay to the change, propose the amendment. And it's exciting the direction that we're heading right now.
Bermudez.
So, like Commissioner Davey, the spirit of this is very important. And it's a very important function that needs to exist. I am, however, concerned about the practicality on a number of levels, including its ability to pass as a ballot measure. And given the at least the platform that the controller-elect has run on, I believe this can be achieved through that entity. So I'm going to vote no.
Daniel Favors.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, could you repeat that? For some reason, my screen keeps freezing.
Just calling for your vote. An amendment to establish as a requirement of the Racial Equity Commission, the conducting of audits.
In light of the language that was pointed to on page 3, I vote no.
Commissioner Davey.
Establishing my appreciation and resonance with the direction Commissioner Hamilton is proposing, and believe that the language of the preamble, as well as our ability to make recommendations, can eventually get us to where he wants us to be, but not willing to burden these proposals with any more responsibilities. I'm going to vote no, but with a word of thanks to Commissioner Hamilton for raising these issues.
Commissioner Garrido.
No.
Commissioner Hamilton.
I vote yes, and I understand we have a time constraint, but for those that are concerned about practical implications, implementation, I'm happy to send some literature and documentation that might be useful in alleviating those concerns.
I echo the sentiments and concerns of Commissioner Davey and Commissioner Bermudez. I vote no. Commissioner Coy. Commissioner Mata. Commissioner Thompson.
I don't know, but I do appreciate the intention, and I do think there will be a lot of work to be done with the comptroller to actually flesh out how to do this in the future.
I don't know. I want to express my appreciation for all the conversations that Commissioner Hamilton is raising. I vote no because I think racial justice commission's work just can't be within the commission. I think it needs to be some shared responsibilities. And if the comptroller's office is charged to do that and certainly step up, I think that is a way for us to go.
Thank you all. The vote tally is
9 to 2.
Nay, 9 nay, 2 yay. And like other commissioners have said, I very much appreciate Commissioner Hamilton and the points that he has raised that appear, in this moment, and the contributions that have been made over the course of the last several weeks that have been incorporated into other aspects, other proposals of the resolution due to Commissioner Hamilton. So are there other questions, comments, proposed amendments to the proposal concerning the Racial Equity Office and the Commission?
Commissioner Hamilton, are you able to hear?
I'm not.
Commissioner Garrido, are you able to hear?
Yes, I can.
Are you able to hear what's happening in the room? I believe the video feed has dropped.
I can hear you now, but I could not hear what the video feed was.
Okay, it appears that the Zoom connection into that room is not working and it's frozen. I'm seeing in the chat that they're working on rebooting.
Budget hearings, they have to be accountable on race equity matters.
So
I don't know how to phrase it.
Point well taken. Before we move to the discussion on it, we have to have a motion to consider an amendment that would require that the Racial Equity Office provide guidance to the legislative body, the city council, for
Incorporating equity
racial equity into
matters into
its annual budget hearings. So we first need a motion.
I will make my motion.
Okay, anybody second that motion? Second. Second. All right, time for comment, and our executive director wants to present us with some information. Thank you.
of that, you know, like it's, I think I would like a little more specific.
So I'm going to quickly comment that if you were to advance this, that I think that this responsibility should be that of the commission and not of the racial equity office. Commissioner Thompson?
I was going to say something very similar to that at the bottom of page 5. Says shall have the ability to propose priorities for racial equity in city decision-making and policies. And I think what Commissioner Bermudez is suggesting falls within city decision-making. And so I also think that's the commission is the right body to actually work with the council to review agency performance as opposed to asking a city agency to, advise the council on how to review another city agency, which I do not think is a very good idea.
Comment?
Seeing and hearing none, Commissioner Bermudez, would you like to modify your proposed amendment? Would you like to withdraw it or advance it as it is?
I would like to modify it.
Okay,
The last bullet on page 5.
Madam Chair, we're not able to hear the readout of the amendment, and nor were we able to hear the discussion, as it appears the Zoom feed may have collapsed a bit. So I unfortunately am not clear on what is currently on the table.
Doing it right now. Okay, can you hear us, Lori? Okay. So the proposal is amended for the last bullet on page 5 to read, to propose priorities for racial equity in city decision-making and policy, including advising city council oversight committees on racial equity matters. That is the proposed amendment.
I can't tell if her hand is raised again. Commissioner Daniel Favors, you're good? Okay, all righty, all righty. All right, I am going to move us to a vote. Commissioner Yu? Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Mata? Commissioner Coy? Jones Austin, yay. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
That's a yes, right, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Garrido?
Yes.
Commissioner Davy? Commissioner Daniel Favors?
Yes.
Commissioner Bermudez? Commissioner Bain? All right. That amendment is passed. So I believe we are ready to move on to the third proposal, which is the true cost of living proposal. May I have a motion to approve this proposal? So moved
So
by
moved.
Bermudez.
So moved.
Motion,
Second.
no, it's a motion to approve. Bermudez, seconded by Thompson. Okay, now we'll move to discussion.
Just point of order. Do we really need a motion? We made a general-
No, we didn't need a motion to move to
Okay,
discussion
yeah,
of,
like.
I know
that's
it's
what we sat here and said
complicated.
Before,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
we just need to hear if anybody has
is there any discussion? All right, look, we are overdoing the rules, so it's gonna be ironclad and tight. And nobody can challenge whether or not we took the proper steps, right? So it's gonna be locked in. All right, I'm not gonna say locked and loaded, it's gonna be locked down. Any discussion? Any comments, questions? All right. Looking at the screen, seeing and hearing None? We will move to a vote on this proposal, beginning. Oh, okay, I am like, we're going home. That's what we're doing. We're gonna vote to go home.
So we're just, at this point, we're just calling the vote on the
We're
amended
not there
proposal.
yet
We're
because
not,
we have to. Roadmap?
oh, I'm sorry, there was a racial. yeah,
Okay.
my bad.
All right. All right, we've taken care of the proposals. We're now going to consider the racial justice roadmap. And I just want to revisit very quickly. There were considerations put forward, suggestions, when we first began discussing the racial justice roadmap. And I want to make sure that we revisit them at this moment. So Commissioner Yu surfaced the idea of including in the racial justice roadmap housing for justice involved persons and the current, addressing the rules and systems that are in place right now that essentially prevent from persons who are justice involved reentering society and cohabitating with family. So you want to take a look at that. We heard from Commissioner Bain that we need to advance as for further consideration, an exploration and focus on the deprivation of basic human rights, including food, clothing, and shelter. We heard from, we talked about racial equity scoring, and that mention is made of that in the roadmap, but I want to just very quickly ask our Commissioner Hamilton if he would like us to ensure that, language is beefed up there or is enhanced to address this issue. Any particulars?
Sure. Yes.
And centering on much of what we talked about during this conversation. Is that fair, this meeting? Good deal. Are there other ideas?
Yes.
And do we have to make a motion to?
Madam
those
Chair.
things?
Currently, the resolution doesn't have detail on what's included in the roadmap, but if there are things that the commission wants to ensure that are included, the language could say including but not limited to, so that it can include these items and potentially others as well.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton?
I would recommend that the roadmap include a recommendation that the city periodically go out and collect asset and debt information disaggregated by ancestry origin so that we can monitor what wealth looks like along with other information. And I could provide an abstract that could be helpful for this purpose. But I think it's useful that the city itself is going out and collecting data routinely as another mechanism of accountability and also measuring and benchmarking.
Okay.
Commissioner Hamilton, a point of clarification. This is beyond the setting of standards for the disaggregation of data, which currently falls under the Office of Racial Equity as a responsibility of theirs.
Correct. This includes literally going out and collecting data on these attributes, which aren't necessarily routinely available.
I will just say that I very much appreciate and I concur with what Commissioner Hamilton is speaking to. We live in a society where, we have to be very careful about whether or not people are even centering on asset development as an equity component. And so I think it needs to be expressly stated. Are there other comments or thoughts? And so what I'm hearing, Commissioner Thompson?
Just one minor thing in addition to that, the city also doesn't collect data on unemployment, and the state doesn't do it for the city separate from surrounding counties. So I would just add unemployment too, in terms of going out and collecting data.
So we are, it seems like there is a joint proposal on the table to modify the resolution with respect to the racial justice roadmap to provide specificity that extends beyond the proposals that were presented earlier, and to include those that have been talked about here at this commission meeting, including housing for formerly justice involved persons, including human rights, food, clothing, and shelter, including more detail concerning racial equity scoring, including a provision around collecting data concerning assets pursuant to the language that has been, and we can look at the minutes to make sure we incorporate it with specificity, and also Commissioner Thompson's add-on, which is escaping me in the moment, unemployment. Forgive me. So, motion to amend. Do we have I move to amend. Can I move? Okay. All right, any questions, comments?
May I ask a question? To clarify, the items that were just mentioned is in addition to also listing out the 6 or 8 that we discussed earlier
Yes,
directly in the.
and in the roadmap.
So including
It is to add them to the
reconciliation
road-
and reparations.
To add them to the roadmap.
Correct.
for the
I'm just
final report.
clarifying that you want those items discussed earlier to be added to the resolution.
What we are proposing is that we make sure that, let me think about this for a second. What we're really centering on is that there are additional issues that we want to be incorporated into the roadmap. And what we are saying is that what you presented for roadmap are those 6 plus the 2 overarching. And we have talked today about additional concerns, additional issues being added to the roadmap. So what we are moving to do is to have the roadmap that is being approved via resolution to incorporate both the items that you presented and the issues that have been raised here in this commission meeting, including housing for the justice involved, human rights, food, clothing, and shelter, racial equity scoring, unemployment, and asset disaggregated data concerning assets.
Right, and unemployment is just within disaggregated data, just going out and collecting data on unemployment.
So that is the motion. It's been moved and seconded. We will do a roll call. Commissioner Yu, Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner, I've lost my list. Somewhere here. Commissioner Mata, Commissioner Coy.
Yeah.
Jones Austin, yay. Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Garrido,
Yes.
Commissioner Davy,
Madam Chair, yes, but want to be sure that we're saying these things. But, so inclusive of, but not limited to.
fair.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Davy? You said yes. Commissioner Daniel Favors?
Yes.
Commissioner Bermudez? Commissioner Bain?
Yes.
All right. All amendments have been voted on. And everyone being clear, I think it's very important just to reiterate as we move to a vote on the resolution overall, that the resolution has been amended to incorporate, General Counsel, I need your help, the following amendments.
Resolution to add the language that we discussed concerning New York City as having a history of racial justice, of struggles for racial justice and equity. The second resolution was the addition pursuant to the amendment by Commissioner Bermudez, I believe, to add to the responsibility of the Racial Justice Commission to provide guidance to the to the council for, sorry, to propose priorities for decision-making and policy, including advising city council committees on racial equity matters. And the final proposal, the final amendment was to provide a list of the, for the racial justice roadmap that should be including but not limited to housing, the human right to food, clothing, and shelter, racial equity scoring, and data collection, disaggregated data collection concerning assets, debt, and unemployment.
Justice involved, persons who've been justice involved. Okay. All right. Having the resolution and the amendments read, may I have a motion to approve the resolution? May I have that motion seconded? All right.
Madam Chair, I just went to another point of order. Don't get mad at me.
No, I'm okay.
But we've already made that motion.
The motion
We're
of
just
the
calling the motion.
amended.
You read the resolutions in their entirety and try to remember everything. Anyway, let's call the vote. Commissioner K-Bang. Commissioner Bermudez. Commissioner LaRue, Daniel Favors.
Yes.
Commissioner Fred Davey.
With great appreciation for you and your leadership, Madam Chair, yes.
Commissioner Garrido.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton.
With appreciation of fellow commissioners, the leadership, and the executive committee, I'm going to vote yes, but a concern that we don't have enough accountability in what we're proposing, and that a statement that there are indeed some practical ways in which we can enhance accountability.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones Austin is a yes. Commissioner Coy. Commissioner Mata. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Yu.
Yes, with appreciation for our chair who read through 7 pages of text today, and I was in awe. Thank you.
Thank you all. The resolution passes. I am delighted and I am thrilled and I am most thankful to all commission members for staying the course, to commission staff, so ably led by our executive director, Nusha Venkatraman. We have a resolution. This is good work. Congratulations to all of you. We will be meeting next week, Thursday, December 16th from 4 to 6, maybe to 6:30. And this, for all who can attend in person, we would appreciate it. It's our final meeting. It's the meeting where we will be voting upon the final report, including the specific ballot language. So there being no further business, this meeting is now brought to a close. Thank you all.